He's Joe Thomas, the Hall of Famer. In fact, teammate of Johnny Manziel's, 2014, 2015. Have you watched the documentary?
No, it's crazy getting ready for the Hall of Fame stuff. I feel like I've been living under a rock because I didn't even know there was a Johnny Manziel Netflix documentary until one of my friends asked me if I watched it last night. And I'm a little conflicted like you. I'm not sure if I want to watch it because I lived it. And there's still a few scabs that I'm peeling off right now after those Johnny Manziel moments. And so I don't know. I'm a little bit torn there.
When did you know that this wasn't going to work out for Manziel?
Well, shortly after we drafted him, he like vanished in the spring. Like we were in the middle of OTAs and the coaches couldn't find him. He had come to Cleveland. He was there for like a day and he was at practice and then he just disappeared. And I think he was just on a bender somewhere in Cleveland partying and he couldn't find his way back to the facility. And so it was at that moment I was like, we may have some problems with this young rookie here. If he can't even find his way during OTAs when he's a rookie, when he should be trying to put his best foot forward.
It's got to be tough for you because you had been through losing seasons. You know, you're looking for professionals. You're trying to do your job at the highest level, and then you can't even trust your quarterback. How frustrating is that for you where you're playing at a all-pro level, and then you got a no-show level with your quarterback?
Yeah, it's not a lot of fun, especially when you're an old guy and you're still showing up for mini camps and OTAs and all the optional stuff in the off season. And here's this first rounder who's supposed to be doing everything he possibly can to earn the trust and respect of his teammates. And he's missing and he can't find him. So that was really frustrating, but I always wanted to give guys a second chance, give him the benefit of the doubt early on. You know, hey, maybe he's still got an opportunity to turn this around. Somebody had to see something in him for us to draft him in the first round. I know he had a great college career, but hey, even if he didn't have the off the field problems, when you look at him as just a prospect, he was short. He was not incredibly fast or quick. It's not like he was a short quarterback that ran a 4.4 and was just lightning quick where you thought he could make up for it. Like he had a ton of physical limitations that the NFL game was going to expose. And you were wondering, like, how is he going to be able to get around the fact that he kind of has a long windup to throw?
Yeah.
He's not really big, so he won't be able to absorb those hits. He hasn't really proven that he could play within the confines of an offense. He was just playing backyard football in college. And then he also doesn't have super athletic ability. So you kind of look at all those things and I'm going, man, how is this guy going to ever be able to figure it out? And on top of that, he doesn't really seem all that committed to being a quarterback.
Congrats on going into the Hall of Fame, the 2023 class. Your thoughts on Dion saying, what if we have maybe a penthouse level? First ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Is that a big deal that there's a gold level maybe for those first ballot Hall of Famers?
You know, I'll let the people that are in charge of the Hall of Fame and the fans kind of make those the determinations and the distinctions. And it almost makes me uncomfortable there. I'm stuttering just talking about it because being at Canton during the enshrinement and seeing all those other gold jacket guys, many of them who were not first ballot Hall of Famers, but guys that were my idols growing up that I revered as players, some of them like Leroy Butler. I had his poster on my wall as a kid. He was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. And for me to stand there and answer questions like, yeah, I think I'm more important than my guy, Leroy Butler, who, by the way, he made me cry when he came up and said congratulations because he was my hero as a kid. It just makes me uncomfortable talking about that. And I know for a guy like Dion, hey, he's used to talking about himself. So he probably is okay answering that question and proclaiming how he's the greatest and he should have his own closet in Canton, Ohio. But for me, I'm just so proud to be one of those gold jacket guys, and whatever they decide to do, as long as everybody feels okay with it, I'm good with it. But honestly, I don't know if we want to start tiering players that are in the Hall of Fame.
And you grew up in Wisconsin, so you're a Packers fan, love Leroy Butler. I'm curious if you gave it any thought of playing a year in Green Bay. J.J. Watt said to me the other day that he wanted to go and play one more year in Green Bay, but something happened where they weren't interested in bringing him back. Did you give that any thought?
Shortly before the Denver Broncos tried to trade for me in 2013, 14, somewhere in there, there was some rumors before the Packers got David Bakhtiari that they were going to try to trade for me because obviously they had Aaron Rodgers and they hadn't yet secured their left tackle. But Ted Thompson was the general manager at the time, and he was not a guy that really made a lot of trades.
Yeah.
He was just a draft and then re-sign type general manager. And so I never really put a whole lot of thought into it. But once I retired, my knee was shot, so I couldn't play any more football. However, I do think playing in your backyard, especially if you're a Wisconsin kid like JJ and going and playing Green Bay, the amount of headaches that you have to deal with family and friends asking for tickets and autographs and access, like that would be a headache that would be far beyond anything that he experienced in Houston or in Arizona, and almost would be a big distraction from trying to go out and play, and to the point where I don't know how much you'd be able to enjoy it if you were the local boy like JJ or myself.
We're talking to Joe Thomas, the Hall of Famer. How nervous were you this weekend?
I wasn't overly nervous. The thing that made me the most nervous, honestly, Dan, was when we got there on Wednesday. We had so many activities, and a lot of them were like cocktail hours where there was a band playing and you're small talking these people and you're kind of yelling, you're projecting your voice. And 2 years ago, I had vocal cord surgery. And so my vocal cords are a little bit weaker than they used to be. So my ability to project and yell is limited. And if I do it for like an hour, I lose my voice. And so I kept losing my voice at the end of every day, to the point where I wanted to practice my speech. But going into Saturday, I was afraid to use any extra words than was absolutely necessary. So I only practiced my speech one time before I gave that speech because I was so worried about getting up there on Saturday afternoon and not having a voice and having to like try to sign my speech for people to hear me. So that was the thing that made me the most nervous. So once I got through it and I had my voice, it was pedal to the metal, and I can't wait to celebrate the rest of the weekend.
I don't know if you followed the Eric Bieniemy story with the Commanders, and that some of the players, I guess, went to Coach Rivera, complained about his style, and he's intense and in your face. What works now with today's football player? What kind of style? And he's not even the head coach; he's the offensive coordinator.
The style that works, Dan, is when you show a player that you are giving them better information, better game planning, and better coaching than the opponent. You're giving them a game plan where they legitimately feel like they have an advantage over their opponent, and they're going to be able to now use all the ability that's God given to them to be able to go out and win and succeed for themselves, for their family, for their teammates, for their city, for their team. That's why I always said that Kyle Shanahan was the best coach I ever had, because when you walked out of his meetings and you walked onto the field on Sunday, you felt like you were more prepared. And that's the best motivation that any pro athlete can get. And so really your style doesn't matter, whether you're Bill Belichick, whether you're just a nice softy, whether you're Eric Bieniemy and you're a yeller, like none of that really matters. And the players don't care about any of that. What they care about is you proving that you're putting them in a better position than the player that they're going to be going against.
Yeah, but the Commanders are complaining. Like, hey, you know what? He's intense. He's yelling at us. You're saying that that shouldn't matter or doesn't matter? Like, did you get yelled at?
Occasionally. Offensive line coaches are known for being a little colorful and having louder voices than most. But I honestly, it's kind of silly, the fact that I saw this morning, I was working out and I saw on TV, like Eric Bieniemy was yelling at his players and the players are complaining. I was like, what? So I would love to know some more details around, okay, which players are complaining? Are these the guys that are bums, or are these like the starters that are like really making a big deal about this? Because to me, it's about the substance of what you say. If you're yelling at me, but you're telling me good stuff, I'm going to listen and pay attention. If you're telling me crap, I don't care if you're yelling or if you're whispering. I don't want to hear about it. And so to me, it sounds a little bit soft and a little bit like, are we worrying about the wrong things right now, Commanders, that, my coach is yelling too much? Like, what is he saying? That's what I would really like to know before I can say that these players need to buck up and tough up a little bit, Buttercup, or are they legitimately like having some reasonable complaints? Like, hey, I'm losing the message. I'm losing the coaching because he's so worried about just berating us.
The defensive lineman that you would put in the Hall of Fame, who's not there.
He'll be there next year, Dwight Freeney.
That was a battle?
That was a battle. Yeah. The times that I faced Freeney, you didn't sleep much the night before because you knew how challenging it was going to be. I knew what his game plan was going to be, right? He's just going to try to run around you for a full half. He's going to wear you out. Then he's going to try to run you over. And then as soon as you stick your heels in the ground and you try to make a stand, it'll be like 3rd and 8, and he's going to spin to the inside and he's going to sack your quarterback. Everybody knew when he was going to do it. Everybody knew when it was coming, but you couldn't stop it. And that's why I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Who'd you meet aside from Leroy Butler this past weekend that you went, oh my God?
It was really cool being able to reconnect with Anthony Munoz, because I'd seen him a few times and I'd worked with him a few times during my career. But I think now being part of that club and having that gold jacket, it's just a little bit different when you hang out with those guys and when you spend some time. I will say, Jack Youngblood, going back to the voice problem, he was outside the hotel on Friday. And he was smoking a cigar and having like a Heineken. It was like 10:30 in the morning. And I'm like, man, you're really living the life, aren't you? And he's like, hey, I got a cigar for you, buddy. And I was like, I can't have a cigar yet. I'm watching my throat because I don't want to lose my voice, and cigars are not good for that. But I can't wait to have a cigar with Jack Youngblood, because that would be so stinking cool. Not only for me, but for my dad and my father-in-law and all these like people that I were looking up to when I was a kid. Like, that era of the NFL was so cool. And all those guys that went on and were in Hollywood and they had these larger than life personas and personalities. It was really cool meeting them and just seeing those guys relaxed, smoking a cigar and having a noon beer on a Friday afternoon.
How challenging is it rooting for the Browns nowadays?
It's not challenging for me. I played there 11 years and I had Johnny Manziel as my quarterback. I had a lot of other guys that maybe weren't fan favorites, or maybe had some issues in their past, or just didn't play all that well. But I think for me, and I think for a lot of other Browns fans, it's the Browns and it's the team. And that is what we get most excited about. And that's where our loyalty lies.
So you don't factor in Deshaun Watson at all. It's just you're rooting for the Browns as a team.
Yeah, I think that for most Browns fans, myself included, like, we talked only about that last year. Like, that was all we talked about in training camp. That's all we talked about during the season. That's all we talked about after he came back. And I think for most of us, we're really excited to talk about Deshaun Watson on the football field, because what happened off the football field will be dissected and talked about till the end of days. And people will agree, people will disagree, but for the most part, it's kind of a dead horse for Cleveland people, because it's like, look, I'm going to cheer for my team.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people don't agree with us signing Deshaun Watson, but at the end of the day, he's allowed back in the NFL and the suspension is over. He served his time there, and the Browns were not the only team that were trying to sign him. And I'm sure that if he plays really well this year, a lot of people will not be thinking about how he ended up getting there.
Good to talk to you. Once again, congratulations, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
That's Joe Thomas, Browns Hall of Fame tackle.